Hello, so I'm going to talk about 14 things to consider when deciding if you want to move to Hawaii, or specifically the island of Oahu. Just keep in mind that each island is a little bit different, and I'm just going to tell you the things that I've learned since moving here to Oahu. So as a point of reference for timing, I moved here in June of 2021, and right now it is March of 2022. So in no particular order, the first thing to consider is cost. So I'll break it down a little further, but just to give you a heads up, if you're moving from like a big city from like the East Coast or the West Coast mainland, and you're moving here, the pricing is not going to be a surprise. But if you're moving from like anywhere else, you can expect to pay at least 2 to 3 times more for everything. So let me break it down a little bit further. So the first thing is rental housing. So a lot of the housing here is going to be studios or 1 bedroom. And I think the going price in Waikiki is maybe $1,200 to $1,600. And best place to look is Craigslist to see which pricing is right now, and also like the rental websites. If you want to get something that is 2 or more bedrooms, you can expect to pay at least $2,300. And also a lot of the base pricing may or may not include utilities, parking, or air conditioning. Air conditioning is not standard here, and you'll also be expected to have renter's insurance. And probably like other places on the mainland, you'll have to earn at least 3 times the price of the rental. And also just know that real estate here to purchase or to rent is highly competitive, and most places will not let you rent a place on the island until you have actually visited the place in person, or have like a family friend or something come and visit the place for you on your behalf. Another thing to consider if moving here is the cost of food. So due to my location, the places that I frequent are places like Safeway, Costco, Foodland, Whole Foods, Times Market, and Walmart, because you guys kind of have to shop around and find the best pricing and depending on the location. And just to kind of give you an idea of cost, so these are some of the costs that I've seen across the different markets when things are not on sale. So like a dozen eggs is about $4 to $5. A gallon of milk that is not organic is about $9. The loaf of the cheapest bread is like $5 a loaf. The cheapest cuts of pork or beef, like ground beef, is like $7 a pound. Things like chicken drumsticks or like wings from Costco, which is like the cheapest place for meat, sometimes, is $5.99 a pound. Strawberries. So if you like want a 1 pound container of strawberries, it's like $6.99. Bananas are like $2.99 a pound. Zucchini is $3.99 a pound. Broccoli or carrots, $2.99 a pound. Apples, $3.99 a pound. And like a bundle of kale or romaine is like $3.80 a head. I'm just kind of mentioning pricing because when I just was deciding to move here, I was like, so how much does it actually cost for real food, not just like restaurants? So that kind of gives you a better idea. There are produce that's grown here in Hawaii and available in the markets, but the pricing is not any better. The difference is that it just tastes better. And just know also, because the produce is getting shipped over, that it may not always be the freshest of produce. Just know that. Another thing to consider is like trying to ship items from like Amazon or some online retailer. So if you think that's like a way to save money here, it's not always the case, because there are some retail distributors through Amazon and some retailers online that will not ship to Hawaii, and there's not even an option. There's no option to ship to it. Like they won't even like deal with it. And also, sometimes when you order stuff here, it gets lost. It's not very frequent, but it does happen. Another thing to consider is like you might be thinking, like I thought, that I could just go and buy cheap stuff here, like from the dollar store. Well, there is no dollar store or Dollar Tree here. There is Daiso, and Daiso is like the Japanese version of the dollar store, but the one they have here is not very useful. It's great for like trinkets, but not for like useful stuff. There are Goodwills here, but I think due to COVID, some of them actually closed down. So there's only like a few, maybe three or four locations on island that are actually still open. So usually like going through Craigslist or like Facebook Marketplace is a good place to get cheap stuff if you want like furniture and stuff like that. Next thing, fuel costs. As of beginning of March, the cost per gallon for premium gasoline is $5.10 per gallon. Yeah, so hopefully you don't drive a gas guzzler. Next thing to consider, internet. So on Oahu, there's a few different providers, but there's two main providers. And like base pricing for like regular speeds is like $50 base price. If you're someone who works remotely and you rely on uninterrupted service, which is something that I need, I have to get the fiber service, and that's $100 per month. And the fiber service is 1 gig with 300 megabyte upload, but even with like the fiber service here, it's actually worse than when I was getting internet services back in Seattle. So yeah, just something to keep in mind if you work and heavily rely on the internet and high speeds and good connections. Another thing to consider is the lack of medical options. I thought I was tripping about it, but I spoke with a doctor and it's true. There's a shortage of medical personnel on the island. So if you're somebody with a lot of medical issues, it's something to consider if you're going to want to move here. If you look online for like urgent care clinics on Oahu, you'll find that there's like a pretty decent sized list. But I think due to COVID, I don't know what happened, but some of those places are actually closed now. So there's only, there's urgent clinics around. But just know that sometimes if you go to an urgent clinic, I've been to one before and I show up during lunchtime and they are fully booked until like their closing time, which is 8 p.m. But there's other times I've shown up to the same clinic and they were able to get me in an hour later. Just something to consider. Also, if you wanted to set up like a new patient visit with like a primary care doctor on island, the wait is 6 to 12 months to set up an appointment, that initial first new patient appointment. And there's also a lot of doctors that aren't taking new patients. So there's that lovely issue. But sometimes a lot of the doctors actually go to satellite offices on the other parts of the island, like North Shore, and then the wait's not as long. So you can, as long as you're willing to like drive up there, bus it up there, you can maybe get an earlier appointment. Also, another thing to consider for medical options is if you have kids. So I got kids and I learned this the hard way, and that I was trying to set up a primary care physician appointment for my kids, and I didn't find out till I drove all the way to the other side of the island that a lot of the pediatricians here will not see children unless you're willing to make sure that they're going to give them every immunization and every vaccine possible. And when I talked with them, they did not know who I could go to get a primary care physician for my kids. They recommended an outpatient clinic, which I did set an appointment with, but the outpatient clinic apparently is run by residents, overseen by doctors, and they gave me a heads up that when I show up there with my kids, I can expect to be lectured about why I should make sure that my kids get all the vaccines and all the immunizations. Just an FYI. But of course, there are emergency rooms here. They're fantastic here. I've shown up to one here due to, obviously emergency. They were great. So there's always the option to go to emergency rooms here. Things also to consider as the transportation here. So our bus system here is called The Bus. I've heard it's pretty reliable, and you can get around like the whole island on the bus, but like it may not be super punctual. It's all right. Also, traffic into Waikiki during business hours is definitely slow. So if you're coming from like a smaller city, you're gonna be like, holy smokes. But if you're coming from a bigger city, like I came from Seattle, it's slow, but it's still moving. So depends on where your point of reference is. Also, if you plan on shipping a vehicle here, like for me to ship my small, very small car from the West Coast, it cost me $1,500, and it took like 10 days to get here. I used Matson shipping, but $1,500 is the base price, and I think it's like almost double if you're shipping from the East Coast, and the time range is from 2 to 4 weeks. Oh, also, if you're shipping your vehicle, just know your vehicle has to be completely empty. I thought I could be slick and pack stuff in the car, so when my car got shipped over, I'd have stuff and I could save on that. No, they check your car and make sure it's totally empty, and in fact, you actually have to clean your vehicle pretty thoroughly just to make sure there's nothing that is like agriculturally based that's going from the mainland that could come to here and kind of ruin the natural ecosystem here. Another thing to consider are pets. So because we're island bound, they want to make sure everything is kept healthy and things just kind of spread like wildfire here. So pets do have a heavy screening process and a quarantine process as well. I don't have pets, so I don't have details on that, but I'm sure you can find that online. Something else to consider, there is a state income tax here. So the scale ranges from 1 to 11% depending on your income bracket. Also, if you're someone who's like going to work remotely, the cost of labor here is less than many of the mainland counterparts. So let's say if your employer bases your salary on the cost of labor in Hawaii, expect a pay cut. So like I got a 10% pay cut moving here, but I think it was worth it. Also, something to consider here is the weather. So I'm from the Pacific Northwest, where it's, I get all 4 seasons. Nothing extreme, but I still get the 4 seasons. Here, every day is beautiful, but it is either hot or really hot. Some days it's a little bit cooler, but that's pretty rare. Most of the time, it's just hot. And it's something I mention because if you're working from home, or if you like to sleep in like a cool room, you may have to pay extra to get an apartment that has air conditioning, or you may have to pay to have air conditioning installed. And also if you want to like buy a vehicle here and you want AC, something to consider. Another thing to consider here, moving here, is island fever. So it's a small island. I didn't realize how small it was until we drove from basically Diamond Head to North Shore, which is basically from like the from the south to the north tip of the island, and it took just a little bit over an hour. And that's like the farthest distance across the island. So it's kind of petite, but there's a lot of things to do here. And if you like simpler things like hiking, beaches, water sports, food is big here, I think you'll probably do fine here. Something else to consider here is job availability, or lack of available jobs here. So the fields that you can still find good employment here are medical based. Doctors, nurses, certified nursing assistants, dentists. I've heard that also if you are into law or have a law degree, you can do pretty well here. And the other job options here are customer service, which is cool. I work customer service for many, many years, but the amount of money you make in customer service versus the cost of living here, can't cover the costs. A lot of people will work multiple customer service jobs, multiple jobs to stay afloat here. Keep that in mind, especially if you think you can just move here and get a job. Hopefully that works out for you, but you may want to have a good chunk of change saved up in your bank before moving here. And probably the last thing I want to bring up, talking about banks, is banking options here. So all the mainland banks, like none of them are here on the islands, and none of the island banks here are on the mainland. And so, if you want availability of cash when moving here, you might want to bring some cash with you, or expect to open a bank account here and have to transfer funds into the bank account here. So just be prepared for that. Other than that, like the trade-off is beautiful weather pretty much all the time, beautiful scenery, and like it's really nice to see people who are just living their lives here. You know, people running at like 5 a.m., people walking with their surfboards to the beach in the morning, which is really fun to see. And just folks like literally standing on the side of the island, like fishing, which is cool. That's fun to see. Yeah, it's a nice atmosphere, and I really like it, and I think it's worth the cost. And I may not be able to stay here the rest of my life. I hope I can, but it's certainly worth the experience. If you have any other questions or comments, please mention it below, and I'll try my best to answer any questions you might have. Other than that, thanks for watching.